So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, which is Max Peterson. Max, I hope you're here somewhere.
Don't worry.
Yeah, I was worried, Max. No, actually. So Max has over 20 years of experience in informatics, in simulations technology, and life science, and the material science research applications. He held scientific marketing, business consulting, and various other technology leadership positions, and he managed a lab automation company as well. I personally had the pleasure of working with Max 10 years ago at Biovia when we worked together. We also worked at Dotmatics, and now we are here at Zifo, so we've kind of grown up together. And today, Max will be speaking to us today about the state of the industry. So, welcome, Max. And hopefully this is...
So, talking about changes to the agenda. So, this was not my title that I originally had sent to the organizers. I'm not really known for short titles, so I'm going to share the title that I actually gave. So, and I think that is hopefully what's going to happen today, right? I mean, we're going to hear from you guys, so we're going to learn. And I'm going to share some thoughts on data challenges in the industry, right? I mean, we are a technology company. We have also domain expertise. And I think that's kind of the perspective that I'm hoping that I can kind of lay out here. No? When we're thinking about digitalization drivers, there's of course external drivers like regulatory, right? The FDA, ever since I was around, has said, get more data-centric and has put in guidelines over the years on explaining how this should be done in the most efficient way. Whether we got there is a different story, right? I heard Pat maybe 15 years ago, and we're still trying to figure out how to do that. Right. And then there's, of course, other external drivers like agility, whether you are trying to save humanity or reduce obesity, right? And then, of course, also shrinking patient populations, right? These are all things that are driving us to use our data in a more strategic way. And there's, of course, also operational ones. But when it comes to the really strategic drivers, I tend to think of this in this way, right? That there are several main goals in the industry. I think that I categorize them into the sort of area around cost efficiency and operational excellence. And then there's the agility and time to market. There's capacity and capability when you're thinking about manufacturing. And then there's, of course, a more strategic approach to quality. Right, if these are your goals, you're going to put some strategies into place. And the way to read this graph is, of course, to say, well, if I'm concerned about cost efficiency, then I can think about increasing operational efficiency or putting some AI or ML strategy into place. And that, of course, follows then more the things that you're actually going to do. Right, that if I'm thinking about one of the biggest cost drivers and obstacles in QC, I may start thinking about review by exception. Or I would put some automation frameworks in place to streamline certain processes. And then at the core of that, of course, you have data. And that kind of goes back to what Margaret just said. At the core of it is data. So, and data really means more than data management, right? I mean, it's not enough to have a cloud platform where you can dump your data. When we're saying data, we're thinking more about the structuring of the data, and that is really metadata contextualization and data modeling. So that's why it's exciting to work for Zifo, because we have both. We have the technology part and we have the domain expertise. So the example that I always think about and that I'm, of course, also most familiar with is like the process side of things, right? So, and I like to think of them into three buckets, right? There's the bill of materials that kind of says what are the process inputs. There's the bill of process, which kind of draws the process diagram. And then there's the process control. That is, of course, dictated by instruments. So, and in the document-centric world, you have, of course, as the name implies, documents for that, right? You have the bill of materials, which is a document. You have SOPs that kind of encode the process so that you can actually execute it. And then you have, of course, documents that gather the QC data. And as an implication, what's the main challenge with this is that fundamentally you're decoupling your process definition from the process control side. So there's a lot of challenges that are associated with that, change management, tech transfer, a lot of problems, developing site recipes and so on and so forth. Yeah, so, but fundamentally on the monitoring and analytics side, where you're trying to do your control charts or your trend overlays or your APQRs, at the end you are tied to periodic generation of these artifacts. And then, of course, you're doing them more ad hoc, right? It's a manual effort, right? This is here a process control chart that I dug up from some work that I did a couple of years ago. Right? And then on the predictive side, really the implication is that what I'm really going to use AI and ML at the first line for is to really overcome the data challenges more at the data model side, right? And that's kind of, we're going to hear some presentations on that. Now, as a technology, it's just wonderful if you can use that to, for example, forage through legacy data or do a data migration, and you need to get the data out of these documents and push them into new, hopefully data-centric environments, right? But really, before you can even think about the strategic things, you have to really go into the natural language processing for data extraction. So on the data-centric side, I think what's really most well done and understood and widely used is, of course, the digitalization of the bill of materials, right? So we have done that for supply chain integration. There's analytics capabilities around reformulation, change management. So that's pretty well understood. The real problem starts when you go into the bill of process and the process control side, right? And there you have to rely on a data model. So for example, something like ISA S88, and you need to put some data automation around that. But then the result is that you can actually do a lot of integrations natively, and you could push your data model to an MES. You could think about hooking this up to a PAT framework. You could even think about hooking this up to a QMS to start thinking about deviations management. And then on the analytics side, you have, of course, the closed loop feedback that we all want, right? That we can feed this back to a process design. So the application is, of course, then that point, real-time monitoring becomes a reality. You can fully automate these controls. You can also start thinking about doing at least data portions of an APQR fully automated. And on the AI ML side, now you can really start thinking about more strategic applications of AI, right? So there is, for example, really interesting examples on deviation detection, right? That you would start building models that can do preventative and predictive determination of those problems. So kind of to wrap everything up is that this is not an academic exercise. The impact is substantial, it's also well documented. And there's also a lot of frameworks there that can help, right? And of course also by extension us. So in that sense, I'm just putting up here a study by McKinsey that basically looked at probably the three most important KPIs on manufacturing: deviations, yield loss, and cost of poor quality. Right, and they are all orders of magnitude, or the companies that have fully adopted these digital technologies have really fully making benefit of that. And, yeah, factors very substantial. And then on the framework side, of course, there is standard and consortia. Right, we already mentioned S88, there's Bioforum, CELA, Allotrope, really organizations that are thinking about how do I structure database to really drive digitalization forward. There's, of course, digitalization frameworks, Industry 4.0 or Pharma 4.0, really thinking about how to integrate AI into manufacturing digital environments. And last but not least, virtualization technologies. So I hope this can frame the discussion a little bit, yeah? Thinking about data, thinking about what digitalization really means. And I think that kind of kicks off the interesting portion of the summit. So thank you for joining, and I'm really excited to talk to all of you. So thank you.